before I do this poem, I just want to ask if we could take a moment of silence for all of the people who were killed in the World Trade Center, who died at the Pentagon and in Pennsylvania on September 11, 2001. Can we do that? Can we take a moment of silence for them? I'm not Baptist, but it helps me to get some responses too.
We can do that.
All right, thank you, thank you. And if we do that, I also want to ask us to take a moment of silence for all the people that have been harassed, detained, imprisoned, tortured, raped, and or killed in retaliation for those strikes. For the victims in Afghanistan, Iraq, United States, and now throughout the world. Can we do that? Can we take a moment of silence for them as well?
All right.
Yeah? Cool. And if we could do that, I also want to ask for just one more thing. And that is that I want to take a full day of silence for the tens of thousands of Palestinians who have died at the hands of US-backed Israeli forces over decades of occupation. And 6 months of silence for the 1.5 million Iraqi people whose children, mostly children, who's died of malnourishment or starvation as a result of a 12-year U.S. embargo against the country, and another round of war. Before I begin this poem, 2 months of silence for the blacks under apartheid in South Africa, where Homeland Security made them aliens in their own country. 9 months of silence for the dead in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where death rained down and peeled back every layer of concrete, steel, earth, and skin. And the survivors went on as if alive. A full year of silence before I begin this poem for the people, for the millions of dead in Vietnam, a people, not a war. For those who know a thing or two about the scent of burning fuel, their relatives' bones buried in it, their babies born of it. 2 months of silence for the decades of dead in Colombia, whose names, like the corpses they represent, have piled up and slipped off our tongues. Before I begin this poem, 7 days of silence for El Salvador, a full day of silence for Nicaragua, 5 days of silence for the Guatemaltecos, none of whom have ever known a moment of peace in their living years. 45 seconds of silence for the 45 dead in Acteal, Chiapas. 1,933 miles of silence for every desperate body that burns in the desert sun, drowns in the swollen rivers at the pearly gates to the empire's underbelly, a gaping wound sutured shut by razor wire and corrugated steel. Let's take 25 years of silence for the millions of Africans who found their graves far deeper in the ocean than any building could poke into the sky, for those who were strung and swung from the heights of sycamore trees in the south and the north, the east and the west. There will be no DNA testing or dental records to identify their remains. Before I begin this poem, 100 years of silence for the hundreds of millions of indigenous people from this half of right here, whose land and lives were stolen in postcard-perfect plots like Pine Ridge, Wounded Knee, Sand Creek, Fallen Timbers, or the Trail of Tears, names now reduced to innocuous magnetic poetry on the refrigerators of our consciousness. From somewhere within the pillars of power, you open your mouth to invoke a moment of silence, and we are all left speechless, our tongues snatched from our mouths, our eyes stapled shut. A moment of silence and the poets are laid to rest, the drums disintegrate into dust. Before I begin this poem, you want a moment of silence. You mourn now as if the world will never be the same, and the rest of us hope to hell it won't be. not like it has always been. Because this is not a 9/11 poem. This is a 9/10 poem. It is a 9/9 poem, a 9/8 poem, a 9/7 poem. This is a 1492 poem. This is a poem about what causes poems like this to be written. And if it is a 9/11 poem, then it's a September 11th, 1973 poem for Chile. A September 12th, 1977 poem for Stephen Biko in South Africa. This is a September 13th, 1971 poem for the brothers at Attica Prison, New York. A September 14th, 1992 poem for the people of Somalia. This is a poem for every date that falls to the ground amidst the ashes of amnesia. This is a poem for the 110 stories that were never told. The 110 stories that history uprooted from its textbooks. The 110 stories that CNN, BBC, the New York Times, and Newsweek ignored. This is a poem for interrupting this program. There are no peace poems here, no poems for forgiveness. This is a justice poem, a poem for never forgetting. This is a poem to remind us that all that glitters might just be broken glass. And still, you want a moment of our silence for the dead. We could give you lifetimes of empty, the unmarked graves, the lost languages, the uprooted trees and histories, the dead stares on the faces of nameless children. Before I start this poem, we could be silent forever, or just long enough to hunger, for the dust to settle and bury us, and you would still ask us for more of our silence. So if you want a moment of silence, then stop the oil pumps, turn off the engines, the televisions, sink the cruise ships, crash the stock markets, unplug the marquee lights, delete the emails, the text messages, derail the trains, ground the planes. If you want a moment of silence, then put a brick through the window of Taco Bell and pay the workers for wages lost. Tear down the liquor stores, the townhouses, the White Houses, the jailhouses, the penthouses, and the Playboys. You want a moment of silence, then take it on Super Bowl Sunday, on the 4th of July, during Dayton's 13-hour sale, or the next time your white guilt fills the room where my beautiful brown people have gathered. You want a moment of silence, then take it now, before this poem begins. Here, in the echo of my voice, in the pause between goose steps of the second hand, in the space between bodies and embrace, here is your silence. Take it all. But don't cut in line. Let your silence begin at the beginning of crime. And we gathered right here in Hamline Park tonight, we're gonna keep right on singing for our dead.